Hello again. Last week, in passing, as I was briefly considering the relationship between church and state, I mentioned the fact that there are Church of England bishops in the House of Lords, by right of their office. And I wondered how that related to other churches and other faiths, and indeed other nations within the UK. What does it mean to have Church of England bishops as part of the UK Parliament, if you are from Scotland, or Wales, or Northern Ireland, or if you're not Anglican, or not Christian, or not a person of faith? Of course, I had no idea then that the notion of a bishop in the House of Lords would make headline news in the following days. John Sentamu has just officially retired as Archbishop of York, and there was a bit of a fuss about the fact that he was not immediately made a life peer. As Archbishop of York, he had previously sat in the House of Lords because of the office he held. In 2005, when John Sentamu's predecessor David Hope retired as Archbishop of York, he became a life peer. And 10 years before that, the same happened to John Hapgood. Similarly, Stuart Blanch in 1983. Before him, there were two Archbishops of York who went on to be Archbishops of Canterbury, so the situation didn't arise. Before them was a guy called Cyril Garbett, who retired in 1955. He didn't stay in the House of Lords afterwards, but only because he died before the details could be sorted out, since a new hereditary peerage was being created. A hereditary peerage was offered to him because since before the late 1950s, the life peerages were much more restricted and bishops didn't get them. And it seems previous Archbishops of York either went on to Canterbury or died in post. The one exception in recent centuries being William McLaggen, who resigned as Archbishop of York in 1908, probably due to ill health, and he didn't receive a peerage. So it's probably safe to say that it has been the done thing, at least in recent decades, and while this has been possible, it's been the done thing to ennoble a retiring Archbishop of York. If we're to believe what's in the papers, Sentamu was told he was in line for a peerage, but then got a phone message to say he had missed out and would have to wait for the next round. One of those mythical number 10 spokespeople said he was kept off the list in order to keep the numbers down in the House of Lords. This last round of peers numbered 18, 6 of which are non-affiliated and cross-bench peers. Claire Fox, a former Brexit Party MEP. Charles Moore, the Brexit-supporting former editor of The Telegraph and Spectator. Ian Botham, the Brexit-supporting former cricketer. Louise Casey, who has a career in social welfare issues. Minouche Shafik, the director of the London School of Economics. And Boris Johnson's friend Evgeny Lebedev, the owner of The Independent and the son of a KGB spy, whose assessed status as a security risk was changed by the Cabinet Office just in time for him to receive a peerage. So those 6 include 2 people who were prominent in society. One businessman and personal friend of the Prime Minister, who we used to think was a security risk, and 3 people who are well known for their recent loud support for Brexit. And all of them were deemed a better or more urgent case than the former Archbishop of York, at a time when number 10 is claiming to want to keep the numbers down in the Lords. To be fair, the government then seemed to change its story from there not being room for John Sentamu to there having been a procedural hold-up with the approval process still going on. And the word seems to be that a peerage will be forthcoming. But those people on this list were deemed to be more deserving. At the very least, it doesn't look good to snub the UK's first black archbishop. All of this is adding to the numbers in the House of Lords, which is unusually large for a second parliamentary chamber, now has very nearly 800 members, about 3% of which are Church of England bishops, one of whom is the Bishop of Oxford. A common objection from atheists at this point is that Christian clergy are part of our government by right of their role. They point out that apart from some very small states, the only other parliament which has clerics making laws by right is Iran. And we tend to criticise Iran for exactly that. Of course, this is a historical side effect of having an established church, but it's more than that, because you'll also find some branches of Reformation thinking which built in more extensive bringing together of church and political authority. We tried something a bit more like that in the 17th century. And while that may not have worked out quite as some had hoped, there's still a conversation to be had about how involved the church should be in running society. Are our ideas on how life is to be lived there for us as a church community, or for us to promote in society more generally? And which ideas on how life is to be lived? Where do we stand on having power in society? Is the power to act something we should always be looking to have? Or is power something we should always be looking to relinquish? Or are we somewhere in between those two extremes? I think power is an important dimension of how society works. Who has the power or authority to do things? And that power, I think, works on at least three levels: on the level of individual relationships, on the level of privilege, and on the level of politics. On an individual level, we may or may not have power because of who we are in a relationship. When I have a conversation with someone in one of the churches where I work, that conversation is always, to some extent, coloured by the fact that I am the minister there. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just saying it is a thing. If I say something, it's not just me saying it, it's the minister saying it. I may not have any actual, let's say legal or constitutional authority to tell people what to do, but I will have influence because of my position. If I was an Anglican priest, then John Sentamu may have had some constitutional authority to tell me what to do. But even without that, the fact that he was Archbishop of York would give him a lot of power in whatever relationships he would have. On the level of privilege, though, that the fact that he was Archbishop of York is tempered by the fact that he is black. When he was first a bishop in London, he spoke about how he'd been stopped and searched 8 times by the police, and how he was the only Church of England bishop to have been stopped and searched in that way. Privilege is a kind of power which we probably don't earn or choose, but which also colours our relationships. I have power because I am a white, British, English, middle-aged, middle-class man. I have no choice over any of those things. But knowing that they give me power because of how privilege happens to work in our society at least means I hope I can begin to learn how to take them into account. And on the level of politics, we have a semi-democratic country where we vote to give power to people. But of course, unless you happen to be one of the lords who voted for which of the hereditary peers gets to sit in the House of Lords, none of us voted for any of them. In fact, surprisingly often, we actively voted against them. James Wharton, for example, lost his seat in the 2017 general election, but he then became campaign manager for Boris Johnson's leadership campaign in the Conservative Party, and he also was on the list ahead of John Sentamu to go into the House of Lords on this last occasion. So what power should we try to use well? What power should we try to take? What power should we relinquish or give to others? And what power should we overthrow? God bless. See you soon.